Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive, this time into the idea of influence, like how we impact people every single day.
Right.
We're looking at The Gift of Influence by Tommy Spaulding. And honestly, it's been a really interesting one. He has this whole premise that, like, the average person influences 80,000 people.
Wow.
In their lifetime, 80,000 people. Had you ever thought about that?
80,000. That's a big number. I mean, I think what's fascinating about that concept is that most of us, we think about influence and we think about, people with large platforms or, big names. But what Spaulding does is he brings it down to earth and he says every interaction that you have every single day, whether it's, seemingly small or large, you're actually having an impact on people.
Yeah.
And so it makes you really think differently about how you interact with folks.
Yeah. And he has this whole analogy about an 80,000 person stadium.
Yeah.
Right. Like, imagine a stadium packed with 80,000 people. And those are all of the people that you're going to influence throughout your life.
Wow.
Are they cheering or are they cheering?
Right.
Based on how you're interacting with the world.
It makes you think about, your day so far, right?
Yeah.
Like if he says it averages out to about 3 people a day over a lifespan.
Right.
So you've already probably influenced the 3 people today. Think about who those people were. It could have been a coworker. It could have been a cashier at the store,
Right.
someone that you held the door open for.
Yeah.
But it makes you really start to think about those little interactions differently, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It really does. So how do we make sure that that stadium is full of cheering fans?
Well, that's where he comes up with this really great acrostic and a framework called LEDAD,
Okay.
which is lift, embrace, act, and devote.
I like it.
And so he uses true stories, and he's a phenomenal storyteller to illustrate how we can live out these principles. And let me tell you, some of these stories are really, really powerful.
Okay, well, let me jump into one. So tell me about Miss Lynn.
Okay.
So Miss Lynn is a math teacher.
Yeah.
And she has this really unique assignment for her 8th grade students.
Imagine you're in 8th grade, and you're about ready to go on spring break.
Right.
And instead of the typical assignment, your teacher says, okay, I want you to write down on a piece of paper
Right.
something positive about each one of your classmates.
Oh, wow.
And so each student has to write 36 pieces of paper because there's 36 kids in the class.
Oh, so every kid gets a piece of paper.
Every kid gets a piece of paper from every other kid, and then she takes all those pieces of paper and compiles a list of all the things that people said about each student individually.
Wow. So you get this whole page of positive things that your peers have said about you.
Exactly. And you can imagine the impact that would have, right?
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, especially at that age.
Yeah. And, Spaulding talks about a kid named Mark who received one of these lists, and this kid carried that list with him everywhere he went.
Really?
He actually had it tucked away inside of his helmet, and until the day that he died, years later, he carried that list with him.
Wow.
And so it just shows you the power of, one small act of kindness and lifting someone up can have a ripple effect for years and years to come.
Yeah, and it really is like you were saying before about the impact that we have on people, even in those small, seemingly insignificant moments.
Right.
We never really know what impacts we're having.
And what if you made it a habit each day just to find something positive to say about someone?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't have to be some big grand gesture. It could be just a simple compliment or a word of encouragement or just noticing something good that somebody's doing and acknowledging that.
Right.
Those little things, I think, can really plant seeds that can make a big difference in someone's life.
Okay, so that's lift.
That's lift.
So how about the story of Tate and Kristen? This really brings home the idea of embrace.
Okay.
Right.
So Tate's this really talented hockey player.
Yeah.
And he's on this team with a boy named Tristan.
Okay.
And Tristan has a really tough time on the team because he has severe epilepsy.
Wow.
Right. So he's really struggling with, fitting in and feeling like he's part of the team.
Right.
And Tate, despite some social pressure, really steps up and embraces Tristan.
Wow.
He really offers him support and acceptance. And what's really interesting is that Tristan had a birthday party, and Tate was the only one of his teammates that showed up.
Oh, wow.
And I think that really speaks volumes about the power of genuine acceptance, right?
Yeah.
Especially for someone who might be feeling a little bit ostracized or different from the rest of the group.
Yeah. And I think that kind of leads into this next story that I want to talk about with George Taylor and the TRU Colors Brewery.
Oh, yeah.
So this is taking embrace and act to a whole new level.
Well, this is a story that's fascinating because George is a CEO, and he founded this brewery. And get this, the brewery only employs active gang members.
What?
As a way to, give them jobs and an opportunity to get out of the gang life.
Wow.
And what's even more remarkable is he employs rival gang members.
Oh, wow.
And so he brings them together, puts them side by side to work in this brewery, and he's really fostering reconciliation within the company itself.
It's amazing. It's like he's created this microcosm of a more tolerant world.
Right.
And he's not just like delegating this either. He's in the trenches with these guys. He actually had one of the gang leaders move in with him after he got arrested.
That's right. This gang leader named Press, who was a Bloods gang leader, was living with George. And one of the stipulations of working at TRU Colors Brewery is no guns.
Right.
And Press got arrested for violating the no guns policy. And so George said, okay, you're coming to live with me.
Wow.
And Press ended up cutting off his dreadlocks, which were a symbol of his gang affiliation after he lived with George for a while.
That is a really incredible story.
Yeah.
But there's a really kind of sad twist to this story as well.
There is a sad element to this story. One of the former gang members who worked at the brewery Thug was actually murdered.
Oh, wow.
And it was a devastating loss for the company. And they were really shaken to their core by this, but instead of abandoning their mission, they actually doubled down.
Wow.
And recognized that, this violence is really a symptom of the very issues that they're trying to address.
Right.
And so they're continuing to do this work.
Yeah. And so what's the takeaway for us? I mean, you and I may not be dealing with gang violence on a day-to-day basis, but I think we can all relate to, there are situations where we could choose to turn away from difficulty, or we could choose to lean in.
Absolutely.
And I think True Colors really shows us the power of ACT.
Right.
Taking those concrete steps to make a positive impact, even if they're unconventional.
Yeah, and it shows that it starts with belief.
Right.
Right? George Taylor believed in these individuals when society had labeled them, as lost causes or criminals, and he gave them an opportunity and coupled that belief with action, and it created an environment where change was possible.
Yeah, so my question for our listeners is, where in your life could you apply that same combination of belief and action? What situation or relationship in your life could benefit from a little bit more embrace and a little bit more of a bolder act?
That's a good question.
Something to think about.
Yeah.
So we've talked about lift and embrace and act, and
Right.
now we're moving into devote.
Yes.
And this is where he talks about the truly extraordinary life of his aunt, Sister Lorraine.
Sister Lorraine is a fascinating woman. She's a Catholic nun who dedicated her entire life to serving others in Liberia.
Wow.
So we're talking about building schools, enduring 2 revolutions, caring for her aging mother.
Wow.
She was
This is serious devotion.
serious devotion. And even when her own health was failing, she opened up an orphanage in Liberia.
Wow.
So it's just a remarkable story of someone who completely devoted their life to a cause greater than themselves.
Yeah, and what's really remarkable to me is that it wasn't fleeting acts of service.
Right.
It was sustained lifelong devotion to this cause greater than herself. She didn't just dip her toes in the water. She dove in head first and stayed there.
She was all in.
Yeah, through thick and thin. So her story really kind of forces us to ask ourselves, what are we truly devoted to?
Yeah.
Are we just going through the motions?
Right.
Or are we passionately pursuing something that makes a difference? And I think it's a powerful reminder that true influence comes from aligning our actions with our deepest values.
I agree.
Okay, so we've covered the 4 pillars of his lead framework: lift, embrace, act, devote.
Right.
And that's a great foundation.
Yeah.
But the book doesn't stop there.
It doesn't.
He goes on to outline these really practical steps we can take to cultivate this influence.
Right. He calls them the 3 I's of influence.
Okay.
And this is where I think the book gets really, really actionable.
Okay, well, I want to hear more about this because you mentioned before we started recording that one of these I's is interest, and that there's a story about a $500,000 footlong.
Yeah.
And this had a huge impact on Spaulding's financial well-being. So tell me more about that.
So picture this. You're at a book signing, and you just got done giving a presentation, and you're chatting with people who enjoyed it.
Okay.
And this really well-dressed man comes up to you, and he compliments you on the presentation.
Okay.
And his name is Bill.
Okay.
And instead of just saying, oh, thank you so much, I appreciate that.
Right.
Spaulding notices that Bill has this really unique jewelry on.
Okay.
And so he asks him about it.
Uh-huh.
And he's like, oh, tell me about, your ring or whatever it was that he was wearing. And this little act of interest actually sparks a conversation.
Okay.
And it eventually leads to a real friendship with this guy.
So he's already practicing that interest principle without realizing it.
Right.
It's like he's instinctively drawn to connect on a deeper level.
He is.
So what happens next?
Well, fast forward, remember that failed sub-shop venture that Spaulding talked about?
Oh, yeah. The one that almost bankrupted him.
The one that almost bankrupted him. So Spaulding is facing financial ruin.
Right.
And in a moment of desperation, he reaches out to Bill.
Oh.
And he's like, I don't know what to do. I'm in way over my head. I need help.
Okay, so this is where that $500,000 footlong comes in.
This is where the $500,000 footlong comes in, because that simple question about Bill's jewelry years earlier led to this connection that ultimately saved Spaulding.
Wow.
Bill was able to step in and use his expertise and his connections to basically save Spaulding from financial ruin.
So because he took an interest in Bill's jewelry, Bill ends up saving him $500,000.
That's right.
That's a pretty incredible return on investment.
It is, right. And it really just shows you that sometimes those little acts of connection can have a huge impact long term.
Yeah.
We often, think about networking in terms of what we can get out of it.
Right.
But Spaulding emphasizes the importance of genuine interest.
Yeah.
Like really caring about the people that you meet and wanting to get to know them.
Yeah.
It's not just about collecting business cards. It's about building relationships.
It makes you think about all the missed opportunities we might have.
I know.
Because we're not taking the time to really connect with people.
Yeah. Right.
We're so focused on what we can get.
Yeah.
We forget about the power of giving.
Right.
Even if it's just a moment of genuine interest.
That's right.
Okay, so that's interest.
That's interest.
So tell me about the second invest.
So invest is all about showing up for people consistently.
Okay.
Especially during tough times.
Okay.
And so he talks about, supporting friends who are going through divorces or battling cancer.
Okay.
Just making those regular phone calls, just being there for them.
Right.
And, he actually equates it to Cal Ripken Jr.'s incredible streak.
Oh, yeah.
Of showing up for every single baseball game.
Right.
It's that reliability.
Yeah.
It's that consistency that really builds trust and deepens those relationships. He even tells a story about how he refunded a friend 23 cents because the friend overpaid for some hockey tickets.
Oh, my gosh.
It wasn't about the money. It was about demonstrating that even in the smallest interactions, you could count on him to be a man of his word.
To do the right thing.
To do the right thing. And so it's really those little investments of time and energy that I think really make a difference.
I think about the people in my life who really show up for me no matter what.
Yeah.
And you know how valued and appreciated that makes me feel?
Right.
So that's the power of invest.
That's the power of invest.
Okay, so we've got interest sparking the connection. We've got invest nurturing it over time.
Right.
But there's one more I that he says is really critical to this lasting influence.
Yeah, the final I is intent.
Okay.
And intent is all about making sure that your actions are driven by a genuine desire to serve others.
Okay.
It's not about ego.
Right.
It's not about self-interest. It's
Right.
about really wanting to see other people succeed and thrive. And he even talks about the Ben Franklin effect.
Okay, I've heard of that,
Have you?
but I don't really understand how it works.
Okay, so this is fascinating. It's a little bit counterintuitive.
Okay.
But the idea is that when we do something nice for someone, our brain actually tries to rationalize that action.
Okay.
So it thinks, well, I want to do something nice for someone I didn't like, so I must actually like this person.
Interesting.
So it's kind of a way of aligning our actions with our feelings.
So you're saying if I want to build a stronger relationship with someone and maybe even influence them in a positive way,
Right.
doing them a favor could actually help.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
And he gives examples of, connecting his stepson with a mentor or helping a young actor get in touch with a Broadway star.
Wow.
So he's really taking that principle to heart.
Okay, but how do we know if our intent is truly positive?
That's a good question.
Because I think it's really easy to get caught up in self-serving motivations,
It is.
even when we think we're being altruistic.
Absolutely. And so Spaulding actually uses the story of RDT DeMolas and the Market Basket Revolt to illustrate this principle.
Okay.
So RDT was the CEO of this supermarket chain called Market Basket,
Okay.
and they were known for their incredibly employee-friendly policies.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
So we're talking about profit sharing, generous wages.
Wow.
Really taking care of their employees.
Okay.
And when the board tried to oust RDT to squeeze out more profit, the employees and the customers actually revolted.
Really?
There were boycotts, there were protests. It was a huge deal.
Wow.
And so it really shows you the power of putting people first, right? The board was focused on the bottom line.
Right.
RDT was focused on the well-being of his employees.
Right.
And ultimately, it was that focus on people that created this incredibly loyal and dedicated workforce and a customer base that was actually willing to fight for him.
That's wild. I love that story.
Yeah, and it really stands in stark contrast to what Spaulding calls fan hogging.
Fan hogging. What is that?
So imagine it's a sweltering hot day and you've got one fan.
Okay.
The fan hogger is the person who points the fan directly at themselves, leaving everyone else to sweat.
Okay, I get it.
And so in a leadership context, the fan hogger is the person who's taken all the credit,
Right.
all the benefits,
Right.
without considering the needs of their team.
Okay.
And, Spaulding actually admits that he's been a fan hogger himself, even after giving presentations on leadership.
Wow.
He tells a story about how, after one of these events, he was really rude to the hotel driver.
Wow.
And it was this real moment of self-awareness for him where he was like, oh my gosh, I'm talking the talk, but I'm not walking the walk.
Right.
And so it just goes to show you that, we all have blind spots. And
Right.
even those of us who, talk about these principles can fall short.
Yeah.
But the key is to be self-aware.
Right.
To recognize when our actions aren't aligned with our values.
Right.
And to course correct.
Yeah, and I think it's a good reminder that, being influential isn't about being perfect.
Right.
It's about striving to do better,
It is.
to be more aware of our impact on others.
Right.
Okay, so this idea of intent goes even deeper than that.
It does.
Because he argues that there's one more I.
That's right.
And this might be the most unexpected one of all.
The final I of influence is...
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
I thought we were talking about influencing others.
Right.
How does self-care fit into that?
It might seem a little counterintuitive, but think about that airline safety instruction that says, put on your own oxygen mask before assisting others.
Oh, yeah.
You can't effectively serve and influence others if you're running on empty yourself.
That's a great analogy.
It is.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
Right.
So prioritizing our own well-being is actually crucial
It is.
for maximizing our positive influence on others.
I agree.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together.
Yeah, and Spaulding actually starts with gratitude.
Okay.
Like taking the time to appreciate what we have, our relationships, our health, our opportunities.
Yeah.
And he even talks about having this attitude of gratitude, which helps us to shift our perspective and realize how much we actually have to be thankful for.
Right.
And I think gratitude can lead to greater self-awareness as well.
Yeah.
Because it helps us to identify those areas where we might be overextended or neglecting our own needs.
Right.
And then, there's the practical stuff, right?
Yes.
Making sure that we're getting enough sleep, that we're eating well, that we're exercising, that we're engaging in activities that bring us joy.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that self-care isn't selfish. It's actually essential
Right.
for us to be able to show up with our best selves.
Exactly.
And this actually ties into some research that he cites about longevity and happiness.
Oh, really?
And it turns out that the strongest predictor of a long and healthy life isn't wealth.
Wow.
It's not even genetics.
Wow.
It's the quality of our relationships.
Wow, that's powerful.
It is. And building strong relationships requires us to be present, engaged, energized, and that starts with taking care of ourselves.
Wow. It all circles back to that idea of filling our stadium with cheers.
Yeah.
We can't do that if we're burped out and exhausted.
We can't.
So Spaulding tells this really interesting story about a group of hospice nurses
Okay.
who observed this common thread
Yeah.
among their patients.
Yeah.
So these are people who are in their final days.
Right.
And you would think that maybe the regrets would be about, missed career opportunities or
Yeah.
material things.
Material things. Right.
But Spaulding says that's not what it was about at all.
That's not what it was about at all.
So what was it about?
The patients kept coming back to these three fundamental questions.
Okay.
Was I loved?
Okay.
Did I love back?
Okay.
And did I make a contribution?
Wow. Those are some heavy-hitting questions.
They are.
And Spaulding actually argues that we shouldn't wait
We shouldn't.
until we're on our deathbeds to contemplate these questions.
No.
That we should be living with these questions in mind every day.
Every day.
And it really puts things in perspective.
Absolutely.
Doesn't it?
It does. And he actually ties it back to that 80,000 person stadium analogy.
Oh, okay.
He says it's not just about filling the seats. It's about what those people will remember us for.
Wow.
Will they be cheering because we lifted them up?
Right.
Because we embraced them for who they were?
Yeah.
Because we made a positive contribution to their lives?
It's a powerful framework for evaluating our own impact, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are we just going through the motions, or are we actually trying to make our corner of the world a better place?
That's right.
And Spaulding doesn't just want us to be good.
Right.
He challenges us to be exceptional.
Yes.
He talks about 10xing our positive influence.
I love that.
Okay, I love that idea.
It's a great concept.
But how do we actually do that?
Right.
It sounds a little intimidating, like we have to, start some grand movement or become a superhero or something.
It doesn't have to be that dramatic. Okay. He emphasizes that it's really about finding that one thing that you're uniquely good at.
Okay.
That one area where you can make the biggest difference.
Yeah.
And really pouring your energy into that.
So focusing our efforts.
Focusing your efforts.
Finding our sweet spot.
Finding your sweet spot.
And maximizing our impact in that specific area.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes the whole 10x thing feel a lot more attainable.
I think so.
So tell me about Sean Lambert and Matthew Kelly.
Okay, so Sean Lambert was inspired by a single mentor to dedicate his life to helping people break free from addiction.
Wow.
And Matthew Kelly is using his talents to revitalize the Catholic Church.
Wow.
And so they're both 10Xers in their own way.
Right, and it's not just about these big names, right?
No.
He also talks about everyday people who are making a huge difference in their communities.
Absolutely.
So tell me about Lisa.
So Lisa is a woman who overcame a really difficult childhood.
Okay.
And she's become this pillar of support for those around her.
Wow.
She's always there to lend a helping hand, offering support without expecting anything in return.
That's amazing.
And it really shows you that you don't need a platform
Right.
or a fancy title to be a 10Xer.
Right.
You just need a heart for service and a willingness to make a difference.
It's inspiring.
It is.
So as we're wrapping up this deep dive into the gift of influence, I think it's safe to say that Spaulding has given us a lot to think about.
He has.
It's not just a feel-good book.
No.
It's a call to action.
Absolutely.
He's challenging us to be more intentional, more mindful, more dedicated to using our influence for good.
I agree.
It's about recognizing that we all have the power to make a difference.
We do.
And that even small acts of kindness, generosity, support can create a ripple effect
Right.
that extends far beyond our immediate circle.
Absolutely.
So as you go about your day, consider those 3 powerful questions.
Yes.
Was I loved?
Right.
Did I love back?
Right.
Did I make a contribution?
Powerful questions.
And remember, you don't have to wait until the end of your life
No, you don't.
to answer them.
Right.
You can start living those answers right now.
Absolutely.
Imagine your 80,000-person stadium filled with cheering fans, all applauding the positive impact that you've had on their lives.
That's a great visual.
That's the legacy that Spaulding's encouraging us to build.
Yeah.
So I'll leave you with this question. What would it look like for you to 10x your positive influence? What one area could you focus on to have the greatest impact?
Great question.
The answer might surprise you. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, keep making the world a better place, one interaction at a time.
I like that.
Take care.
See ya. So the second I is invest, and this is where we look at showing up for people consistently.
Okay.
Especially when times get tough.
Yeah, like during a really hard time.
Exactly. And Spaulding, he talks about supporting friends who are going through divorces or maybe battling cancer.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And those small things that you do, like just making those regular phone calls, just letting them know that you're there for them, can make a huge difference.
Yeah, I think about, those people who just show up consistently in my life.
Right.
And it makes me feel so seen and supported.
Exactly.
And I think he actually equates it to like Cal Ripken Jr.'s incredible streaks.
Yes, that's right. He talks about how Cal Ripken Jr. showed up for every single baseball game.
Every single one.
Every single one. And that kind of reliability and consistency is what really builds trust and deepens those relationships.
Yeah. I remember he even told a story about how he refunded a friend 23 cents.
Yes.
Because he overpaid for some hockey tickets.
That's right. It wasn't about the money.
Right.
It was about demonstrating that even in the smallest interactions, you can count on him.
Yeah, to do the right thing.
Exactly.
It's the principle of the thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's those small little investments of time and energy
Yes.
that I think really do make a difference.
I agree.
Okay, so we've got interest, which is like sparking that connection.
Yes.
We've got invest, which is nurturing it over time.
Right.
But there's one more I that he says is just crucial to this lasting influence.
Yes. The final I is intent.
Intent.
And this is all about ensuring that your actions are coming from a genuine place.
Okay.
Right? It's not about self-interest. It's not about ego.
Right.
It's about really wanting to see other people succeed and thrive. And Spaulding, he even talks about the Ben Franklin effect.
Okay, yeah, I've heard about that, but I don't really get how it works.
Okay, so the idea is that when we do something nice for someone, our brain actually tries to rationalize that action.
Okay.
So it kind of goes, well, I wouldn't do something nice for someone that I didn't like.
Right.
So I must actually like this person.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, so it's a way of aligning our actions with our feelings.
So you're saying if I want to build a stronger relationship with someone and maybe even influence them in a positive way,
Right.
doing them a favor could actually help.
Exactly.
Huh. That's kind of a mind twist.
It is a little bit counterintuitive, but
Yeah.
it's really fascinating. And Spaulding talks about how he's done this, connecting his stepson with a mentor.
Okay.
Or helping a young actor get in touch with a Broadway star.
Wow.
And so he's taking that principle to heart.
Right, and he's seeing real results.
He is.
Okay, but how do we know if our intent is truly positive?
That is the question.
Because I think it's so easy to get caught up in our own self-serving motivations.
It is.
Even when we think we're being altruistic.
Absolutely. And to illustrate this point, Spaulding actually uses the story of RDT Demolus.
Okay.
And the Market Basket Revolt.
Okay, I've heard of that. Tell me more.
So RDT was the CEO of this supermarket chain called Market Basket.
Okay.
And they were known for their incredible employee-friendly policies.
Oh, yeah, I think I've heard about that.
So profit sharing, generous wages.
Wow.
Really taking care of their employees.
All right.
And when the board tried to oust RDT to squeeze out more profit, the employees and the customers actually revolted.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
There were boycotts, there were protests. It was a huge deal.
That's crazy.
And it just shows you the power of putting people first.
Right.
The board was focused on the bottom line.
Yeah.
RDT was focused on the well-being of his employees.
Right.
And ultimately, it was that focus on people that created this incredibly loyal and dedicated workforce and a customer base that was actually willing to fight for him.
That is so wild.
Isn't it?
I love that story.
And it really stands in contrast to what Spaulding calls fan hogging.
Fan hogging.
What is fan hogging?
Okay, so picture this. It's a sweltering hot day, and you've got one fan.
Okay, I'm with you.
The fan hogger is the person who points the fan directly at themselves,
right,
leaving everyone else to sweat.
Oh, I got it.
And so in a leadership context, the fan hogger is the person who's taking all the credit, all the benefits.
Right, all the glory.
All the glory without considering the needs of their team. Okay, yeah.
And Spaulding actually admits that he's been a fan hogger himself.
Oh, really? Even after writing this book?
Even after giving presentations on leadership.
Wow.
He tells this story about how, after one of these events, he was actually really rude to the hotel driver.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, and it was this real moment of, self-awareness for him.
Right.
He was like, oh, my gosh. I'm talking the talk, but I'm not walking the walk.
Right. Yeah, we've all been there.
We've all been there. And I think it just goes to show that we all have those blind spots. Even those of us who talk about these principles can fall short.
Yeah.
But the key is to be self-aware.
Right.
Recognize when our actions aren't aligning with our values.
Right.
And course correct.
And course correct. Absolutely. All right. So this idea of intent goes even deeper than that.
It does.
Because he argues there's one more I.
Yes, there is.
And this might be the most unexpected one.
The final I of influence is...
Hold on.
Yes.
I thought we were talking about influencing others.
Right.
How does self-care fit into that?
Okay, so it might seem counterintuitive.
It does.
But think about that airline safety instruction.
Yeah.
Put on your own oxygen mask before assisting others.
Oh, yeah, right.
Because you can't effectively serve and influence others if you're running on empty yourself.
That's a great analogy.
Right.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly.
So prioritizing our own well-being
yes,
is actually crucial to maximizing our positive influence
it is.
on others.
I agree.
Okay, I'm starting to see how it all fits together.
Yeah.
So how does Spaulding suggest we start with this self-care piece?
Well, he actually starts with gratitude.
Right.
Taking the time to appreciate what we have, our relationships, our health, the opportunities that we have.
Yeah.
And he talks about having this attitude of gratitude.
Okay.
Which helps us to shift our perspective and realize how much we actually have to be thankful for.
Right, and that gratitude can lead to greater self-awareness.
It can.
Right, helping us identify areas where we might be overextended.
Yes.
Or neglecting our own needs.
Right.
Right, and then, of course, there's the practical stuff.
Yes.
Making sure we're getting enough sleep.
Eating well.
Exercising, engaging in those activities that bring us joy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's about recognizing that self-care isn't selfish.
No, it's not.
It's essential for us to show up as our best selves.
Exactly. And he even ties this into some research that he cites about longevity and happiness.
Oh, wow.
And it turns out that the strongest predictor of a long and healthy life isn't wealth.
Wow.
It's not even genetics.
Wow.
It's the quality of our relationships.
Wow, that's really powerful.
It is.
Okay.
And building those strong relationships requires us to be present, engaged, energized. And that starts with taking care of ourselves.
So it all circles back to that idea of filling our stadia with cheers.
Yes, it does.
We can't do that as we're burnt out and exhausted.
Exactly. We can't pour from an empty cup.
So Spaulding tells this really interesting story about a group of hospice nurses who observed this common thread among their patients. So these are people who are, in their final days.
Right.
And you would think that the regrets would be about missed career opportunities or material things.
Right, the things that we often prioritize.
Right, but Spaulding says that's not what it was about at all.
That's not what it was about at all.
So what was it about?
The patients kept coming back to these three fundamental questions. Was
Okay.
I loved?
It's okay.
Did I love back?
Wow.
And did I make a contribution? It really is incredible, isn't it?
Wow, those are some really powerful questions.
They are. And Spaulding argues that we shouldn't wait until we're on our deathbeds to contemplate those questions.
Yeah,
That we should be living with those questions in mind every single day.
it really puts things in perspective, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And he actually ties it back to that 80,000 person stadium analogy.
Oh, okay.
And he says it's not just about filling those seats.
Right.
It's about what those people are going to remember us for.
Right.
Will they be cheering because we lifted them up, because we embraced them for who they were, because we made a positive contribution to their lives?
It's a powerful framework for kind of evaluating our own impact, isn't it?
It really is. Are we just going through the motions, or are we actually trying to make a difference?
And make our corner of the world a better place.
Right.
And Spaulding doesn't just want us to be good.
No, he doesn't.
He challenges us to be exceptional.
He does.
Right. He talks about this idea of 10xing our positive influence.
I love that concept.
I love that idea too.
It's a great concept.
But how do we actually do that?
Right.
It sounds a little intimidating.
It does.
Like, do we have to start some grand movement or become a superhero?
No, it doesn't have to be that dramatic. He emphasizes that it's really about finding that one thing that you're uniquely good at.
Okay, yeah.
That one area where you can really make the biggest difference and pouring your energy into that.
So focusing our efforts.
Yes, focusing your efforts.
Finding that sweet spot.
Finding your sweet spot and maximizing your impact.
Okay, that makes the whole 10x thing feel a lot more attainable.
It does.
So tell me about Sean Lambert and Matthew Kelly.
Okay, so Sean Lambert was inspired by a single mentor to dedicate his life to helping people break free from addiction.
Wow, okay.
And Matthew Kelly is using his talents to revitalize the Catholic Church.
Wow, okay.
And so they're both 10Xers in their own way, right?
Right, and it's not just about, these big names or these big personalities.
Yeah, it's not.
Right, Spaulding talks about everyday people
Yes.
who are making a huge difference in their communities.
Absolutely. So he tells the story of Lisa.
Okay.
And Lisa is a woman who overcame a really difficult childhood.
Right.
And she's become this pillar of support for the people around her.
Wow.
She's always there to lend a helping hand.
Wow.
Offer support without expecting anything in return.
It's amazing.
And it just shows that you don't need a platform or a fancy title.
Right.
To be a 10Xer.
Right.
You just need that heart for service and that willingness to make a difference.
So inspiring.
It is.
So as we're wrapping up this deep dive into the gift of influence, I think it's safe to say that Spaulding has given us a lot to think about.
He has.
This isn't just a feel-good book.
It's not.
It's a call to action.
It is.
He's challenging us to be more intentional, more mindful, more dedicated to using our influence for good.
Right.
And I think the biggest takeaway for me is this idea that we all have the power to make a difference.
We do.
That even small acts of kindness, generosity, and support can create this ripple effect.
Yes.
That extends far beyond our immediate circle.
Absolutely.
So as you go about your day, consider those three powerful questions. Was I loved? Did I love back? Did I make a contribution?
Such great questions.
And remember, you don't have to wait until the end of your life to answer them.
No, you don't.
You can start living those answers right now.
Absolutely.
Imagine your 80,000-person stadium filled with cheering fans.
Yeah.
All applauding the positive impact that you've had on their lives.
That's a great visual.
That's the legacy that Spaulding is encouraging us to build.
It is.
So what would it look like for you to 10x your positive influence? What one area could you focus on to have the greatest impact? The answer might surprise you. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep making the world a better place, one interaction at a time.
Love it. See you later. TAAE.